the experience of the user, the employee working at the organization is the differentiator. I don't care what your benefits package is. I don't care if you have pizza parties or a 401k or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, what are you asking me as a person to do? The employee experience is what's going to determine winners or losers, because companies are crumbling from the inside.
I was a terrible leader. I was a terrible process manager, just awful. And I feel so sorry for the people who work for me. Why would you want to be on every single sales call? That doesn't make any sense, because you hired this guy. This is what he does. You need to take the handcuffs off. Since that time, the A++ player pretty much doubled his sales, doubled them. And they went from like 20 to 40 in 2 years.
Can you prove to me that I don't need an ERP in 1 month? And I said, give me a full month. I'll focus on that and prove to you that you don't need to spend the $100,000.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Crunching Your Growth. I'm Phil Masiello, founder, author, and forever student of what actually scales. Today, we're tackling the silent killer of growth, broken workflows. My guest is Tom Nassr, a serial entrepreneur who built and exited the design agency Checkmate Digital. He now co-leads X-Ray Tech, where he designs intelligent, human-centered workflows that let teams do their best work. So we're taking some practical automation, AI that removes bottlenecks, and systems that make your business faster, clearer, and more profitable. If you ever thought we're busy but not moving, this one's for you. So let's bring Tom in and let's see what he has to say about his business and what he can teach us about growth and about removing bottlenecks in business. And Tom, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Phil. Excited to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. You say that now. Yeah, give us a little bit of a rundown of you, your past, your history, what you've done in the past, and how you got to this point where you're building AI workflows and things like that.
Sure. So I actually come from the philosophy world, and I stumbled my way into asking the right questions and into technology. So I ended up building a design studio, Checkmate Digital, for about 6 years, bootstrapped it to 20 people, and was able to sell that in 2019. I like to say everyone joined me working from home in 2020. But my impetus in starting X-Ray Tech was this theory that really this technology and systems can do a lot more for people than it typically does. And I was able to sell my first agency, Checkmate Digital, because of the automations that I had set up inside of that organization. And long story short, now we give people the gift of time every day when we design a better way for them to work.
So when you say design studio, like what were you doing? Designing ads or
interfaces? So we were doing user interface, user experience work on apps, business to business apps. Literally, right, designing where the buttons are and the headings and all that stuff, just laying out applications. And we built dozens of apps. Some went on to get acquired by the New York Stock Exchange. Others went on, to IPO, and it was pretty amazing to see an idea, right, go and scale. But we were just the agency. We just got, a flat fee for our work.
Sure.
There was no long tail there. So I was kind of sick of the agency life. And because I had operational systems that just made it extremely efficient to operate, we were able to sell it to a much larger agency. My team was able to, continue to do their good work. And I had, golden handcuffs to not start another UI UX design agency again, which really wasn't a problem.
Yeah, I don't think agency life is a bit difficult. But and I come from a background of entrepreneurship and starting businesses, and then scaling businesses. I never pictured myself running an agency or building an agency. It sort of just happened. But I do a lot of things with it, so we do get a lot. We sort of uh, we use the agency, and then if we find a concept or a business or a startup that we like, we sort of get involved that way just to keep us in the game. But
The exposure is really bar none, right? And
yeah.
in the agency world, you get exposed to a ton of different problems, ton
Oh
of different
yeah.
shapes and sizes, and like that is really alluring, right? The thing about the agency life that is exciting is just the variety of problems. And for me, the major problem that I was dealing with running an agency was, man, I need to set up this Google Drive folder structure and project plans and presentations and customers and QuickBooks and all these things. And at one point, like, I literally had 100-step automation that did complete, customer onboarding from the moment they signed the DocuSign. And it set them up in all of our internal systems, sent the emails, did all the things. And it was pretty good for 2018, 2019. And it all used Zapier, by the way, like
Oh yeah.
that no code, platform to run automations. That's what it was built on.
Wow.
And it was nice for the time being, but the problem that I recognize is, wait a minute, every agency or organization has this onboarding problem. How do you set everybody up consistently? And in 2020, I did consulting at a bunch of other agencies to set up and fix that exact problem.
Yeah.
Said, this could be a whole nother business. Am I gonna, hop back on the founder train, or am I just gonna be fat and happy as a consultant? And once you're bit, you got to go. So I started up a company again.
Yeah. We it's funny you should say, the amount of problems that you face, because there's two sides to um, what I do, right? There's Crunch Growth, which is an agency, but then I also coach, which I
Yeah.
enjoy doing. Um, I like that a lot. And one side sort of feeds the other
Hmm.
both ways, because we have clients who clearly need coaching and get to, maybe you get from 0 to 5 million, 0 to 10 million. But every founder I've ever seen in my life, and me included, you get to a certain point and you get stuck, and you have to figure out how to get through. And talking to people or getting involved with people or having a coach that's already been through it and can sort of guide you is always important. And but we get clients who come to us because they think that that's a marketing or an advertising problem, to get from like 0 to 10 million or 0 to 20 million. And then we'll look at it and I'll say, your problem's not marketing or advertising or even messaging. Your problem is somewhere else.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example, just a
Please.
perfect example, where we had this client come to us about I guess about 2.5 years ago so far. And they had a brand. They were in the food business, and they also wholesaled and did private label.
Yeah.
And they got from 0 to 20 million in about 4 years, and did quite well. And then they got stuck at this 20 million mark, and they were there for about 2 or 3 years, just stuck
Mm.
in that world. And the founder called me up, got in touch with us, and we had a call, and he's like, I've been through 3 agencies already and nobody can get it right, and the advertising and marketing and messaging. And
Yeah.
I said, and he said, we just hired this guy. And I knew who the guy was in the industries. This guy is trying to build our wholesale side and our private label side, but he's not able to get anything through. So I think we have a big problem. And that just clicked in my head. I said, I know this guy. This guy's an A++ player. There's no reason at all this guy shouldn't be making major headway.
Yeah.
And I and so we started looking at what happened in the past, and we were doing some due diligence. And then I said, I'm not so sure this is an advertising and marketing problem. Would you be open to doing a 2-day offsite with your senior team, and let's get to the bottom of what really could be the problem? And I knew it. I had an idea in my head as to what the problem was, but you can't. I don't want to say it out loud at the time, because then I could have been wrong. So we got together, and about 3 hours in, I said to the A plus plus player, I said, "Why do you think you can't make headway?" I said, "I know some of the things you've done. Why do you think you can't make headway?" He said, "I'll tell you exactly why, and I've expressed it, and nobody wants to listen to me." I said, "What is it?" He said, "I'm not bound by the prospect schedule. I'm bound by the founder schedule. He wants to be on every single sales call." Now the guy is running operations, he's running marketing, he's running, the warehouse, he's running everything, finance. And so therefore, I have to try and figure out how to schedule a prospect meeting with his schedule. He said, and it's almost impossible. And I said, "Why would you want to be on every single sales call? That doesn't make any sense because
Seriously.
you hired this guy. This is what he does. You need to take the handcuffs off." So, personal relationships, a customer, blah, 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 blah. I said, "You got to let go." I said, "You're at this level. You're the bottleneck.
Yeah.
You're at this level. You have to start managing the business." It took us the rest of the 2 days to get him off and to get him to understand it and realize it, right? But he actually agreed to back off, give it a test. He'd do it for, a couple of months and see how it
Yeah.
goes. Well, since that time, the A plus plus player pretty much doubled his sales,
Wow.
doubled them. And, they went from like 20 to 40 in 2 years. And now they're still growing. Now they're growing the brand. They've got other opportunities.
Yeah.
It took all that to get him to understand that he was the bottleneck. And so, you know, that type of what I'm explaining there is how this whole thing works between coaching and the agency, because it also works the other way. People call me up for coaching, and then they have a small business, and then inevitably they need advertising, marketing support, social media support, whatever it is. So sort of feeds both ways. But I like the diversity of problems, and I love coaching. I just love it.
Well, and that story I think really illustrates too the a couple layers to was that the CEO actually? The
Yeah, the
CEO
founder, CEO.
yeah, founder CEO's problem. It's like one is being aware that you are the bottleneck, and two is like the freedom of allowing other people to make the mistakes, allowing decisions to be offloaded. Right? There's only so many decisions that a founder can make in a day. It's 100, right?
Right.
Pick your cap, whatever it is. And if you're making decisions that other people can make, that is simply not the right way to scale the business, and it ends up being a process problem.
100%. And I see it all the time. I work with founders and I work with entrepreneurs. I've been involved in the world of entrepreneurship and startups for more than 20 years, and so I see it constantly. And it's so difficult for the founder to let go. And this is why you always hear these stories about, oh, I got private equity money, and
Yeah.
then they brought in this CEO and sort of pushed me out. They didn't push you out. You pushed yourself out because you couldn't get the business from 20 to 40 or 40 to 60 or wherever it's going, because you're trying to control everything. Look, I've been there. The first year of business, yes, you have to have control over certain things. Second year, third year, fourth year, you have to start building a team that you can sort of manage, that can go out and help the business grow. Because if you're going to try and make every decision, and I talk about this. My first business was an entire disaster. I started when I was 27 years old. It was a disaster. Not the concept, not the store. It was a retail store. We were busy. The problem was in the operations side of it. I
Yep.
was a terrible, terrible, terrible leader. I was a terrible process manager, just awful. And I feel so sorry for the people who worked for me at that point in time, because they must have gone home every night just thinking, I can't do this anymore. This guy's nuts. And it was really because I was trying to control everything. I wasn't transitioning knowledge to anybody else. It was ridiculous what I was doing. And, I did it for about three or 3.5 years, and I wound up selling it. I'm not a person that gives up, but I saw the writing on the wall, and I said, there's something wrong with me. I got to get out of this, and I got to figure this out in order for me to be successful in life, and which I did. But yeah, it's too many people are out there. Too many entrepreneurs get like that, and that's why you need sort of a coach or process or systems to show you how to get things done. I think it's a little bit easier today because we do have a lot of systems in place to be able to let people do things and monitor the situations.
We see it a lot of times with small businesses that aren't quite at the $10 million mark yet, right? You
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
especially right now, you have sort of the baby boomer generation that have led businesses that are 1 to 5 million in revenue, year after year after year. Now they're like, well, I kind of want to retire, right? I kind of want to get out of this business, but there's no process documentation,
Right.
right? You can't transfer that knowledge because there is no workflow for somebody else to come in and execute. So if someone were to buy the business, how do they run it?
All
Right?
right.
A really, really simple question. But unless you have like a process playbook or some way of transferring that knowledge and enabling, Joe Schmo off the street to come in and execute at 80, 90% of the quality that you can do it, what are you buying? What are you selling? You can't. The business is you, and you end up kind of getting stuck. So I bet you had a retention problem on top of that when you were 27, right? You had a rotating door of people because they're like, "What do you want me to do?
Oh,
I can't do it right, right?
let me
There's
tell you,
no clear path."
it was terrible. It was awful. And yeah, no, no, no. It was awful. But we even experienced it. I'll tell you. Subsequent to that, that's what got me down to Maryland. I was in New York, and I came down to Maryland to go to graduate school. And it wasn't because I thought education was going to solve my problem, but
Yeah.
I thought I needed to think differently, and that was the only thing I could think of at the time. And and I got involved. Had a little bit of money. I got involved, and I invested in this small chain of stores. They had two stores, and I got involved to help grow it. And we grew it to like 12 stores in the DC area. And then we bought a
Wow.
company in Connecticut that had four stores similar to ours. And we bought this company, and it was a husband and wife who owned it and ran it. And they started it with one store and they grew it to, five. And when we bought it, there were virtually no systems in place. And we're sitting there going, you talk to everybody, and every store sort of had their own
Yeah.
methodology for running things and how they handled things. And by virtue of the locations and by virtue of the the amount of money that was in those markets, they did sales and business
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
profitably, but almost by, almost stepping on their
Despite
own toes. Yeah.
Yeah, despite their lack of systems and process, they,
Yeah.
still successful. Yeah, the integration between especially when you start acquiring companies, we've seen it in private equity, especially when you start to do these roll ups. You have our systems are on Microsoft and our systems are
Oh
on
God. Yeah.
Google, and we self host ours, and then it's like, how do you merge these? How is it just a rock paper scissors shoot competition? To decide what path you're going to take. Like, it's just pandemonium for most of the roll ups that we see. It's amazing, but now I think there's one layer of visibility you get where everyone does have digital systems in large part, and it's pretty glaring when you can't repeat a process. But how do you actually decide, and what's the strategy behind that? And at the end of the day, people are trying to do their best work. They're just trying to show up, do a good job, and go home with a paycheck. And a lot of companies make that really hard to do when the process isn't clear.
It's true.
Right? I mean, you're allowed, like, you've seen this, and it's in marketing, it's in finance. It doesn't matter your discipline. Like, you're designing what people do at work. Like, that is the job, regardless of what job it is, regardless of the industry and the department. It's like some people live in Excel. The job is, I need you to push around cells in Excel. And one of the things that I've been really starting to talk to my mentors about, and different big clients that we have, is the experience of the user, the employee working at the organization, is the differentiator,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't care what your benefits package is. I don't care if you have pizza parties or a 401k or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, what are you asking me as a person to do?
Yeah.
Are you asking me to waste my life in Excel pushing numbers that nobody looks at, and I have to copy and paste things between that and a presentation, and go to a board meeting and pretend that all this information is accurate when it's not,
Yeah.
right? Or are you asking me to use my brain and leverage these wonderful tools that we have now and be a very defined piece of this overall process where I can have ownership, I can have visibility and understanding and passion about the little piece that I play in this overall system.
Yeah.
And the user experience as an employee, the employee experience, is what's going to determine winners or losers, because companies are crumbling from the inside. If you can't fulfill, regardless of how much of a vacuum the market around you is, if you can't fulfill that because people can't get out of their own way, there's too much work between the work, game over.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. No doubt about it. It's just interesting. You were talking about roll-ups with private equity,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because we get involved with some groups that continually buy companies. And what's funny is they usually have one company that's sort of old, right?
Hmm.
You've been around for 20, 30 years, and they buy
Got
that,
a lot of followers. Yep.
and then they start bringing in younger companies that maybe only have 3 or 4 or 5 years worth. And it's funny because I'm thinking of this one situation where it was an old company. It was big. You would know the name, and we were doing work for them. And then they got bought by a private equity group who started bringing in more consumer products. They were a consumer product company. And what was funny was the systems that the foundation company used were just so old, like,
Terrible.
um, and the younger companies all have, like, new and innovative systems, and they try. It's the foundation company is always trying to push these outdated
Oh, they can't go
systems,
that way.
and you're going, dudes, you got to go the other way.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
using, you're still using SAP, and it's a piece of garbage, and it was a piece of garbage 20 years ago, and it's still a piece
Hmm.
of garbage. And these guys have a better system. You have your ERP systems are just total disasters, and you got to go the other way. But they always think, because the finance guy always says, "Oh, we made this massive investment in SAP, or we made this massive investment in this ERP system," and yeah, great, but it sucks. So
Yeah.
these guys have a system that they didn't invest that much in, and it's much, much better. So it's
It's
always interesting.
incredible that ERP or to ERP or not to ERP discussion, right? It's incredible. We had a mid-market company in the biotech manufacturing space,
Yeah,
and they came to us and they said, "Look, our CFO wants to switch over everything to an ERP. CEO, I don't want to do that. Can you prove to me that I don't need an ERP in 1 month?" And I said, give me a full month. I'll focus on that and prove to you that you don't need to spend the $100,000 in ERP, the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of conversion time, lost efficiencies, and additional consulting to make sure everything actually fits.
yeah,
And long story short, not only did they not buy the ERP, because they didn't have to buy the ERP, they were able to scale 2-3x during COVID because their product was particularly applicable to labs during the testing process for the
yeah,
vaccines. And they didn't lose any training time. Everyone got to continue to use the systems that they knew and loved that took them from 1 to 5 million. And they were able to grow from 5 to 25 million, in 3 years, because they just had their systems talk to each other. Automations just connected the dots across departments, and nobody's job materially changed. They were just able to focus instead of updating multiple systems at one time,
yeah,
right? And it was just like, wow, this idea of like a custom patchwork ERP that is like unique to your entity is like today, right? You don't need Oracle, you don't need SAP. If you're on the cusp of that decision, like, please talk to me or talk to anyone in the automation space generally. But from a workflow design perspective, you have a workflow. It is consistent and it is working. You are here, right? You
right,
don't need to rip all of that out and say, let me go into the unknown with the 800-pound gorilla that is called an enterprise resourcing planning tool, because that's what my competitors that are $100 million bigger than me are doing. That's not necessarily right.
right.
Right, like there is a timing component, there is a scaling component, there's a networking component, right? There's a lot of other ways to scale that don't involve doing what the other guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the whole point of being, smaller and nimble, is you
Yeah.
don't do what the other guys are doing, and you try and work around it. I've my experience with ERPs from looking at companies that use them or from working with companies that use them is that the actual people that work in the company figure out ways to bypass them
Mhm.
because nobody really knows how to work SAP. The only people that do are the consultants that are charging you 150, $200,000 a year to
Yeah,
keep the system running.
yeah.
But they're really feeding the machine to work around it because, you know,
They still use a spreadsheet, right? You
yeah,
know they do.
um,
You know they do.
yeah, it's ridiculous to me. Well,
'Cause
it,
the system ERP systems are designed in a vacuum without
yeah,
the user in mind, right? They're like, we need to just move this data from one place to another and make sure, the same number appears in all these different places,
yeah, exactly.
right? It's not designed with, okay, you're an ops manager on a manufacturing floor at this type of company, and you actually need to see these handful of data points in order to make your next decision,
Yeah,
right? And when you orient it around the decisions that the human needs to make, it totally changes what the interface needs to look like. It totally changes, the work that you actually need to do and the way the systems need to mold around the person.
yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about design, right? And if you just take a step back and think about designing the system after you design the work that the person does, it's
Yeah.
just a totally different discussion. And I'm hopeful that the AI hype will dampen a little bit around this because so many people are trying to just wave the magic wand of AI around your work, and it's like, great, you're just going to create slop in a system you don't understand. Like
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the result of just waving it, right?
I had somebody reach out to me yesterday. Look, I love AI. There's things that I think AI does really, really well. We've been using
Absolutely.
it in our company for about 7 years. There's tools out there that we've built using it. There's flows that we've built with it. A lot of things um, that are great with it. Definitely data analytics, no question about it.
Totally. Totally.
So, but I had somebody reach out to me on LinkedIn, and they've I don't. They've been in business for a year. They set up a shingle a year ago, and all of a sudden, they teach companies how to implement AI in their companies. And I'm thinking, you have no experience with AI. You haven't done anything with it. And then I had this guy on last week, Dan Ward, who from Detroit Labs, and he said, parts of AI are solutions waiting for a problem.
Totally.
And he said, when people want to pitch me on AI, he said, and we use it in our company, no question about it. So when people want to pitch me on AI, I always say, show me a relevant solution that has a quantifiable payback that you implemented AI for. Show that to me, and then we can talk. And none of
Mhm.
them can, you
Yeah.
know. So you're 100% right that there's a lot of people out there building stuff that's, it's just building for the sake of building. Everybody's suddenly an AI expert. I was at an investor conference last week, and this guy said, you stick AI onto your name and everybody wants to talk to you. He said, and then you look under the hood and it's just, it's a guy with a couple of spreadsheets.
Yeah. It's just amazing. I think the priority of putting AI first, I think, is really the misguided part. Like in your business and certainly our business, we do use AI in a bunch of different places, but it's often the last thing that you layer in to the process because you need to understand the process first.
Yeah.
Then there's some automations that are deterministic, which is really nice to be able to rely on something that will always, if this, then that. Like that result, that deterministic result is really, really nice. And then to layer in the components of enrichment or extraction or categorization, like that's where it becomes really useful and starts to, be able to create quantifiable outcomes. It's not, all right, well, we just threw everything out and just said, AI, do it. Let me just open up another ChatGPT window and just paste this thing in it day after day after day. Is that your job now? You went from spreadsheets, right, and moving stuff in spreadsheets to copying and pasting into ChatGPT. Like this is just as bad, right? It's hey,
Yeah.
everybody's
No,
learning how to do it.
I agree with you. I think that the first place we used AI, the first time we used it was in data analytics, and we had gotten somebody had sent me this uh, product that was in beta test to try it on extracting uh, advertising data from clients and looking back and forward and trying to figure out what the problems were and what the
Yeah.
solutions are and all that stuff, which was a
Very
great
data.
solution for us because when you take on a new client, they've been advertising for years and you
Yeah.
don't know what worked, what didn't. You got all this data. And that to me was great because it really gave us insight into a lot of things. Was it perfect? No, but it was a heck of a lot better than trying to do it manually
Yeah.
or with spreadsheets. And then and so we started using it for data analytics as the products keep getting better and the output gets better. And then we started looking at uh, you know uh, generating content with it, and I hated that because it was inauthentic, but it and you couldn't just take it, and a lot
And
of
set it
people do.
live.
Yeah,
Right.
you couldn't just take it and say, okay, well, here we're going to make a post or we're going to make a whatever. Uh, uh, and so, but what got you was about 60% of the way there. Then you put human eyes on it to clean it up and turn it into something. Okay, it saves a little bit of time
Yeah.
because sometimes your brain gets stale with ideas. Then we started doing work with it because we do a lot of video work, short form, long form, and things
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
And we started using it for ideas.
Mm.
And I said, okay, well, this is good for ideas. It give you 10, 15 ideas and then you kick it around and then but you still need humans to refine it.
Totally.
And then, all these products came out about 2 years ago. You don't need your advertising and marketing agency. You just plug this product in and it'll create ads and it'll push them out onto Meta and Google. And we tested a couple of them and going, maybe this is something we can use, but they're garbage. They're absolute garbage. You can't. And the consumer, I read a statistic the other day that said 72 or 70 some odd percent of consumers who can tell if an ad is AI driven, and they immediately reject the product
Mhm.
immediately because what they say is, and this is something we know in marketing and advertising. Consumers want authenticity. They
Mhm.
want to know who they're buying from, what they stand for. And then you show them this fake AI driven ad and they reject it.
Yeah.
And then everybody, as soon as I say this in a forum or whatever, everybody always points to the Coca-Cola ad that came out at Christmas last year. And I said, that's completely different because Coca-Cola has every season has come out with an animated version of
Mhm.
something. They've always had for 50 years. They've always had the animated,
Yeah. Polar
the
bear and yeah.
polar bears and Santa Claus. So it wasn't a stretch to say, okay, well, instead of using people to animate it, we'll have AI animate it. Okay, great. I'm sure there were humans in there refining it, but to think that that's going to work for every single company, it's not.
I mean, it's a slop factory at the end of
Yeah.
the day is what those types of things are. But I do really like the use for analytics, especially
Oh yeah.
because you were doing that work,
Sure.
right?
Manually.
That process existed and you knew what good looked like. You had some data points of this is what I'm trying to extract,
Yep.
and you had a reference point, you had a baseline, and you could use AI to like try to hit that baseline, identify similar patterns. The one of the areas that we've been using AI for the last like three years now at this point, we built an internal product for all of our call recordings. Now, there's a million out there, right?
Sure.
Fireflies and all those things, right? A million out there. But what we really wanted to focus on were the key decisions that were made, the progress that was made, and the tasks that are to do based on this call, because we're trying to eliminate anybody taking notes on calls.
Right.
Right? That was the thing. Hey, can I be here and not right typing or writing anything down? I want to be here. So that was a huge differentiator for our
Yeah.
service that we wanted to instill. And because we built our own system that does this, we're able to automatically approve or deny tasks that are getting updated or created inside of all of the respective projects.
Hmm.
So we could pick something up off the shelf, but it wouldn't be able to do that. And we wouldn't be able to enrich or further ask questions, right, in a chat format. Who was the person I talked to yesterday that was really concerned about the pricing for this product? Oh yeah, let me send them this, new product release update, right? It's like, because it's so embedded into our systems, we get to do those really fine-tuned things that improve the experience of project management at X-Ray, right? Or sales ops at X-Ray, right? And like, we insert that as part of the role that different team members play. And it's just been interesting to see, well, is it worth the $3.14 that it costs us a month to do this, right? Like, yeah, it is, right? And it's not going to be the 19.99 per seat for any of those other ones, or Zoom AI, or any of those other things, right? It's just amazing, the financial benefits when you do roll your own system like that. But balancing it out to actually be a workflow that existed to begin with, right? You don't want to start with blue ocean. You've never done this thing before, and
Right.
now you're going to add AI into this process. You have no baseline on knowing whether or not it's even good.
Yeah.
And we had a baseline in terms of project management for this stuff, so we're able to design the AI around that baseline, and it really paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. Those note takers crack me up because I decline them every time
Yeah,
because I have never seen anybody go back and look at the notes. I never have. And and you still have to read it. So
yeah,
now you're reliving the conversation. You can't go back and say, look for the keywords and, it just I've never I tried to use it once or twice, and to me I found it to be more cumbersome than it's worth. And because at the end of the call, you're always recapping. Okay, well these are the 4 or 5 decisions that were made on the call. Okay,
yeah.
that I can remember. you know, and
Well,
if I
and
don't
it's an
want to
extra
if I don't
bot
want to
in the
write them
meeting.
down while I'm on the call, I write them down after the call.
Right. Well, and it's an extra bot in the meeting, right? And it's a little inauthentic. I think it breaks something in the connection of talking to somebody.
Sure.
The that was another component that we really wanted to make sure, is that it's not an extra thing. It's just whatever system you're in, you just click record in Zoom or Teams or whatever, and it blends into the background. But the valuable part for us is that it just updates internal systems,
Yeah.
and to be able to do that passively was has been really handy. And we do expose that to the client too, right? They have access to all this stuff, and they can see the decisions and progress, and to do actions that we can assign stuff to them, right, when it's their homework and not ours.
Right. Right.
And helps just at the end of the day create accountability and transparency. um you know or do people go back and look at everything from previous recordings? Of course not. But sometimes it does really come in handy when you're dealing with a really fine technical detail.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. But it cracks me up. I was on a call yesterday on a Zoom call, and after the call, I got 4 different
Email.
um, emails about notes. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah,
meat geek, this, that, and the other one.
yeah, Travis's note taker, Bob's note taker. I'm like, oh my God. I'm never going to use them. I just deleted the emails.
Yeah.
I know what was said. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, it sounds like an interesting business. How are you? What type of clients you go after, or how do you get them?
Right now, we're pretty much, I mean, over the last well, we turned 5 in January. So
Oh,
over the
nice.
last 5 years, we've operated entirely on inbound. We have a YouTube channel at X-Ray Automation. If you want to learn how to set some of these technical things up, you'll see my face on there teaching technical things. And we're also channel partners with Airtable, Zapier, and a bunch of other platforms. Essentially, we do expert integration for these tools, right? You want to connect your QuickBooks to HubSpot or
Right.
Salesforce to NetSuite, whatever it is. We actually set up those automated workflows, and integrations in those tools. So we're typically we're creating the biggest value for mid-market companies and more than 5 million or more in annual revenue. It's basically where our retainer tends to really pay off.
Sure.
And we start with one department, right? Somebody who raises their hand and says, I'm drowning, I need help, right? That's where we start, because a lot of times they have the biggest cracks in the foundation that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And then you solve those underlying source of truth, data transparency problems, and reliability of that source of truth being updated which should be automatic. It shouldn't be manually updated, right? That
Right.
source of truth, and then you can reuse that source of truth in every other domain in the business.
Right.
So you think about your customer list, your lead list, your financial integrity, all of those different systems that are the underpinning of forecasting and inventory and invoices and all those things. You start with the foundational system, and then you gradually progress to all these other departments that end up using some subset of that data, and it just makes everybody's life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, I'll bet. It sounds like it. Yeah. It's yeah, the integrations are always a challenge with businesses.
Well, it's
So,
a different skill set, and you have directors of marketing or directors of finance that are sort of pigeonholed into figuring this out, right? In your job description, nowhere does it say connect automations that make your life easier or your team's life easier, right? It's a whole new job role. And that's the thing that we focused on in 2021 is, hey, this workflow designer, somebody whose role it is to design the way that work happens for humans. This was pre ChatGPT, right? That's the whole job. And it's somewhere in the director to C suite level, chief workflow officer type person, or director of workflows, or something like that, who's going to say, you need this information. And who's generating that information? How does it get updated? Okay, let me make sure those systems, whether it's ops related or not, right, get updated. Sometimes it's under the technology department, right? You have tech teams that are just being asked to do all these operational efficiency things, and they're like,
yeah.
"No, I'm building product, right? No, I'm doing something that's more mission critical." And the workflow designer is going to say, "What is your experience now? Let me streamline that experience, and then allow other people to have a better experience because their data is not broken, their workflow and distraction laden day is able to be mitigated because the information is just served to them at the right time so that they can make decisions. The whole point and the whole bottleneck of companies is in their ability to throughput decisions that actually create value,
Yeah.
right? Raise that ceiling. Like that's
See,
that's the bottleneck.
this is what I think people miss about uh, the use of AI is that in a business, people think AI is some sort of an app or a tool, and it's not. What it is another discipline, no different than marketing or financing. And you just said it. There's a guy that's a workflow guy. And whether he's using AI or whether he's using anything else, or if he's just integrating, right? That's a position. And that's what you would use AI for
Right.
to make it,
This
to
like
make things more efficient. But it's a discipline no different than finance, marketing, whatever. And I think people are missing that today.
I think there's a huge adoption of that skill set of people that are just interested in it, right? People that are in finance or in marketing or in, ops or manufacturing, whatever. They're like, oh, if I can connect these two apps, if I can automatically send that email, that would save me a little bit of time. I want to do that for my own sanity, right? So people are learning about low code and no code, learning about automation and getting exposed to these AI tools in that context.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you're adopting these new skills, you're teaching yourself, you're not getting paid anymore.
Right.
And you're kind of doing stuff that's definitively not in your job description. And that's where I think there's just an awakening, an honesty that we need to have here, an honest conversation. It's like you're doing new things. Like this is a whole job right
Right.
here is just focusing on how this
Yeah,
stuff connects.
yeah, no
And
question.
it's not the accounting department's problem.
Yeah,
It is
no question.
higher level than that to make sure that this information
Yeah,
is streamlined.
100%, 100%. Yeah, and you're right. There are people that are doing it. There are people that are learning how to do it, and uh, trying to build agents, trying to build AI agents to do certain things, repetitive tasks. But
And
I
good.
think if you look at a corporate structure, I think what companies are missing, they bring in AI consulting firms. Oh, how do we use AI? And then, those guys are getting paid. And again, it'll be another 3 or 4 years before they realize that they just wasted a lot of money. But But the discipline is, you bring somebody in who's in charge of that, who's a workflow person, who's going to figure out what needs to be integrated and what needs to be done to solve those workflow problems or make things easier and more effective. That's where the payoff is. When you can get people, it's not about, you're going to lose jobs. This whole thing with Amazon getting rid of whatever 20,000 jobs last week, right? That's got nothing to do with AI. And the thing that really aggravates me about it is, everybody talks about let's bring everything back to the U.S. and bring work back to the U.S. Okay, you're just sitting there while Meta and Amazon and Apple and everybody outsource everything overseas, and you're totally missing that, right? You want to bring steel production back to the United States. It's going to do nothing. But those 20,000 jobs, that had nothing to do with AI, has nothing to do with scaling back decision making, has everything to do with getting it done cheaper offshore. 100%. And so, people are just, see, this is the AI effect. No, it's not. It's got nothing to do with AI. Those jobs had nothing to do with your jobs aren't going to be eliminated with AI. You'll be more productive with AI.
Yeah, it's a reallocation more than anything, and
Yeah.
I think the AI discussion from a marketing perspective is what is leading, right? Oh, AI adoption is so high right now. The reality is technology is way ahead of human adoption.
Right.
It's not even close, right? The rubber has not met the road here.
Right. Right.
It's a couple feet off the ground at best, right? And where AI is making the biggest impact for people is amplifying me. I'm able to do more things. The whole team collaboration
Right.
and integration of AI into a larger system is not well established. It's people trying to wave AI to replace the whole system, which generates slop and is terrible and doesn't pass the sniff test as you alluded to earlier, right? Or it's I as an individual am able to contribute to a lot of different domains a lot better now, right? I can ask a quick question to ChatGPT to understand what my legal question should be when I send that question over to the legal department, right? I can ask the legal department a better question, right?
Right. Right. Right.
That's what's happening. It's not a wholesale rip and replace. We're just not there,
Right.
and I think I just think it's a little misguided to pretend that we are.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're coming up on the end. Any kind of parting words? Anything you want to impart to some young entrepreneurs, startups, business in general?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to start playing around with these tools. And regardless of what your skill set is today, A- AI and these systems and these like low and no code tools are going to amplify your faculties.
Yeah.
So even if you came from a literature background or a philosophy background or whatever it is, right, history background, um, these business building tools and systems are more approachable now than they ever have been. And if you can ask a good question, you can figure a lot of this stuff out on your own. So I would really encourage, experimentation and real world experience with this stuff because it's like anything else. You need 10,000 hours in your prompt box before you're really going to know how this stuff works. And it's a moving target to begin with. So you have to experiment and not just read the headlines because it's so much more of an experience to be in it than to read about it. And give it a try.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that you should bring up the prompt because there's so many people who just don't know how to write a prompt to use ChatGPT at all. And it's so funny. I could do a class just on writing a prompt, which I probably should. But anyway,
And you can ask too, like cheat sheet here, just one thing. Ask what prompt should I write to
right.
generate this result, right? Like there's no rules. You can ask this thing whatever you want. So why don't you start by asking it, how can I use it more effectively?
Well,
Um,
there are
Start.
a couple of tools out there that always have in the prompt box, improve the prompt, and you
Yeah, yeah,
click that and it'll improve the prompt. You know.
absolutely.
Yeah. So this was gold, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I think for everyone watching, pick one process this week, map it out, remove the bottleneck. you'll feel the lift immediately. If you're a company and you're struggling with workflows, you're struggling with integrations, you're struggling with some things, connect with Tom via X-Ray Tech and what's lowcodeengineers.com, by the way.
So, Low Code Engineers is actually getting rebranded as X-Ray Hourly. We're going to be announcing that in January with our full 5-year report, basically on being around as a workflow consultancy. But X-Ray Hourly slash Low Code Engineers, previously is just an hourly collaborative build service. So you hop on a Zoom call with a low code engineer, with a low code expert, and actually build your system 1 hour at a time, so that you, the operator, maintain operational knowledge of how your system is configured, and you also learn alongside an expert who's doing it with you. So for small medium businesses, like million to 5 million range, it's a really great offering. We have just great reviews and retention for that, because people get to build alongside an expert, and it's just a rare opportunity to do that, compared to Fiverr and Upwork, where you hand the keys over and you're like, please help me, right?
Mhm.
And you don't kind of get that consultative approach to be guided through how you think about and how you fix a given problem. So hourly X-Ray is our hourly service, and then X-Ray Tech is our retainer service, where we do complete workflow transformation for organizations. We go through an audit process, draft a plan, and actually execute all the way to change management and training, and deployment and maintenance. So it's those two offerings. We do nothing in the middle. If you say I have $5,000 and I want to, build this process, and I'm going to tell you how to do it, I'm going to say you should find somebody else to help you, because we do not do that. It's either that retainer or hourly model, and we really, pride ourselves on creating more time for the people we work with.
That's great. Well, if today helped, follow us every week on E360 TV. We also show them on YouTube and in a bunch of other places. So, but share this if you got a lot out of it. Share it with a founder who's stuck in busy work. And I'm Phil Masiello, and I will see you next week on Crunching